In a restaurant where wealth wasn't just money, but a religion, a man's worth was judged by the brand of his suit and the age of his wine. In this world, arrogance was mistaken for strength and humility for weakness. Tonight, a French billionaire, a man who thought his net worth gave him a free pass to look down on everyone, decided to make a black waiter the punchline of his joke. He leaned in, a cruel smirk on his face, and said something in French. He was sure it was the perfect way to hide his venom in plain sight, a private joke for his fawning guests. And just as he'd planned, they laughed. A wave of condescending chuckles rolled across the table. But they wouldn't be laughing for long. Because in that moment, they'd all made a catastrophic mistake. They'd underestimated the quiet man serving their table, a man whose silence wasn't submission, but observation. Section 1, The Gilded Cage. The restaurant was called L'Opulence, a name that told you everything you needed to know. It was a temple of fine dining, perched 50 floors up, piercing the city skyline like a glass needle. The air inside was thick with the smell of truffle oil, melting butter, and the expensive perfumes of its guests. The lighting was low, making every table feel like a private island in a sea of hushed conversation. To work at L'Opulence was to be a ghost. The staff were trained to be invisible, moving with a silent, ballet-like grace, their presence felt only in the seamless flow of service. They were the silent gears in a machine built for the ultra-rich. Among them was Samuel, a man whose calm exterior hid a world of depth. For 3 years, he'd navigated this world of fake smiles and entitled demands, his quiet confidence a shield against the casual cruelty of the patrons. To his colleagues, he was respected. To the guests, he was usually just a part of the furniture. Tonight, Table 7 was held by Monsieur Jean-Pierre Dubois, a French industrialist whose name was always in the financial papers. He was a man so wealthy he seemed insulated from basic human decency. He was in his late 50s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that held a predatory glint. He wore his arrogance like a custom-made suit. He was with 3 associates, all of them radiating the desperate eagerness of people who orbit power. They were there to close a deal that would make Dubois even richer. The wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux that cost more than Samuel's monthly rent, flowed freely. Dubois held his glass to the light, his voice a little too loud. The key to negotiation, he announced in a thick French accent, is to never let them see you as an equal. You establish dominance. It's the language of power, you see. His guests nodded like puppets. Samuel approached the table with an amuse-bouche, moving with his usual quiet efficiency. Dubois watched him, a look of bored disdain on his face. He saw a black man in a uniform, and in his narrow mind, that was the entire story. The billionaire had a nasty habit of amusing himself by putting others down, and tonight, he felt the familiar, ugly urge. He wanted to put on a show. He waited until Samuel was refilling his water glass. Then, he switched to French, speaking to the woman on his right. His voice was low, but loud enough for Samuel to hear every word. Regard ce pauvre type, Dubois sneered. Il faut tuer il travail si dur, just pour nous serveur de l'eau. Je me demande si elle même assez d'argent pour se payer un repas decent. What he said was, look at this poor fellow. He has to work so hard, just to serve us water. I wonder if he even has enough money to buy himself a decent meal. The woman, Isabel, giggled. The other 2 men joined in. It was a small, poisonous moment of casual cruelty. They were safe inside their language barrier, sure their mockery was a secret. They didn't even look at Samuel. To them, he wasn't a person who could feel or understand, he was just a prop in the play of their own importance. Section 2, The Unseen Depth. Samuel didn't even flinch. His expression remained perfectly neutral. He finished pouring the water for Dubois, his hand as steady as his nerves. He then moved around the table, topping off the other glasses with the same unhurried grace. The laughter continued, fueled by Dubois's smug satisfaction. He felt clever. He decided to push it further. As Samuel moved to clear the bread basket, Du Bois spoke to another guest, his French dripping with even more contempt. C'est un vie triste, nsce pas. Passer ses soirées à regarder les autres vivre dans le luxe. Sun horizon se limite à ce plateau d'argent. It's a sad life, isn't it? To spend your evenings watching others live in luxury. His horizon is limited to this silver tray. Again, laughter. It was bolder this time. At a nearby table, an elderly couple looked over, troubled. They couldn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. They saw the smirking billionaire, the laughing guests, and the silent, dignified waiter. But inside Samuel's mind, all was calm. He'd heard words like these before. He'd learned a long time ago that a person's ugliness was a reflection of their own empty heart, not his own worth. What they didn't know was that he'd grown up in a world far from this one. His father was a Ghanaian diplomat, and his mother was a French literature professor at the Sorbonne. French wasn't just a language he knew, it was the language of his childhood, of the philosophical debates he had with his father, of the poetry he loved. He was working at l'Opulence not because he had to, but because he chose to. A family tragedy had sent him searching for anonymity, a place where he could just observe the world. He was writing a novel about the very things he saw every night: power, class, and identity. Men like Du Bois weren't just patrons, they were research. His professionalism was a wall they couldn't seem to break. His refusal to react was its own kind of defiance, and it was starting to frustrate them. Du Bois had fired his shots, and the target simply refused to acknowledge they had hit. So, he decided to escalate. When the main courses arrived, carried by Samuel, Du Bois gestured impatiently at his plate of roasted duck. Garçon, he called out, using the outdated, demeaning term. Le vin. Ce n'est pas le bon accord. The wine. It's not the right pairing. He had chosen the wine himself. This was a clear attempt to blame the waiter, a pure power play. This was the moment Samuel had been waiting for. Not with anger, but with perfect clarity. He had let the man reveal the full extent of his arrogance. Now, it was time to respond. He placed the final plate down and stood straight, his posture relaxed but commanding. He looked directly at Monsieur Du Bois. The entire restaurant seemed to fade away. Then, he spoke. His French wasn't just fluent, it was exquisite. It was the French of the Parisian elite, so precise and elegant it made Du Bois's own accent sound clumsy. Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, Samuel began, his voice low and resonant. Si je pousse me permettre, le Château Margaux 1982, avec ses notes de cassis, de cèdre et de fumée de tabac, est en réalité considéré par de nombreux connaisseurs comme un accompagnement presque parfait pour le canard rôti. L'acidité du vin coupe la richesse du canard, tandis que ses tannins soyeux complètent la texture de la viande. He had said, "Forgive me, sir. If I may, the Château Margaux 1982, with its notes of blackcurrant, cedar, and tobacco smoke, is actually considered by many connoisseurs to be an almost perfect accompaniment for roasted duck. The wine's acidity cuts through the richness of the duck, while its silky tannins complement the texture of the meat." But he wasn't done. He tilted his head slightly. "Peut-être, cependant, que votre palais préféré quelque chose d'un peu plus audacieux? Un pomerol, par exemple? Bien que, personnellement, j'ai trouvé que la subtilité de ce Margaux est précisément ce que en fait un choix si sublime. Mais comme on dit, chacun a son goût. Il est simplement rare de trouver quelqu'un dont le goût s'écarte si radicalement du consensus des experts. Perhaps, however, your palate would prefer something a bit bolder. A pomerol, for example. Although, personally, I find the subtlety of this Margaux is precisely what makes it such a sublime choice. But as they say, to each his own. It's just rare to find someone whose taste differs so radically from the expert consensus. The silence that fell over table 7 was absolute. The laughter was gone, vanished into thin air. In its place was stunned disbelief. Isabel's mouth hung open. The two men just stared. They had been laughing at a stereotype. But the man standing before them had just shattered that illusion. He hadn't just understood their insults, he had responded with a level of sophistication that made them look like fools. You could almost watch the arrogance drain from Dubois's face. The tan on his cheeks was replaced by a pasty, gray pallor. He had used French as a weapon, and that same weapon had just been turned against him with devastating skill. Samuel hadn't been angry. He'd been worse. He'd been clinical. He had calmly and politely dismantled the billionaire's entire act, exposing it as a hollow sham in front of the very people he was trying to impress. That last line, "It's just rare to find someone whose taste differs so radically from the expert consensus," was the final twist of the knife. It subtly suggested that Dubois wasn't a man of unique taste, but simply a man with no taste at all. Dubois opened his mouth, then closed it. For once in his life, he was speechless. The power dynamic at the table hadn't just shifted, it had completely flipped. Samuel, the pauvre type, was now the one in command. The guests, who had been Dubois's fawning audience, now looked at him differently. Their smiles were gone, replaced by awkward, uncomfortable expressions. They were embarrassed to be with him. Wordlessly, Samuel gave a slight nod, turned, and walked away. He didn't need to look back. The restaurant manager, Mr. Coulson, who had been watching from afar, approached the table. "Monsieur Dubois," Mr. Coulson said, his voice quiet but firm. "Is there a problem with your meal?" "No," Dubois choked out. "Good," Mr. Coulson replied, his tone making it clear that Dubois's behavior had been noted, and it was not welcome. The business dinner was ruined. The deal Dubois was so sure of now felt fragile. His associates were looking at him, wondering, if he could so spectacularly misjudge a person right in front of him, what about his business judgment? Dubois ate his meal in a simmering rage. Every bite tasted like ash. Every sip of the now humiliatingly expensive wine felt like poison. He was trapped in a prison of his own making. The story spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Samuel became a quiet legend overnight. The next day, the news got worse for Dubois. One of the key partners pulled out of the merger, citing concerns about his professional judgment and character. The story leaked to a columnist. It became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms about the billionaire who mocked a waiter and ended up revealing his own ignorance. He'd lost more than a deal, he'd lost face. Conclusion. Back in his quiet apartment, Samuel opened his laptop and started to write. He wrote about the silence that comes after an illusion is shattered. He wrote about the difference between just speaking a language and truly understanding it. And he wrote about how sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not to shout, but to speak a quiet, well-aimed truth. This story is a powerful reminder, isn't it? It reminds us that dignity can't be bought and respect is something everyone deserves. True class isn't about how much money you have, but about how you treat people. In the end, Jean-Pierre Dubois walked into l'opulence thinking he was the most powerful man in the room. He walked out humbled by the one person he had considered completely insignificant. He learned a hard lesson that night: you should never underestimate the person standing across from you. The uniform they wear or the job they do never tells the full story. In his attempt to mock the waiter, the billionaire had only managed to hold up a mirror to his own impoverished soul. And the reflection was something the whole world got to see.